All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We've got three-time Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, broadcasting legend, and Cowboys great. We got Mr. Daryl Johnston. Moose, how's everything going for you?
Everything's good, Zach. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So we're about a week and 2 weeks away from free agency. Season's wrapped up. Kind of looking towards next year. The one thing I want to ask you about. So there's been some news in recent days about proposed rule changes. I want to ask you your thoughts on potentially maybe modifying the onside kick rule, and also Baltimore's. I don't know if you saw they had a suggestion to maybe change how the overtime begins. I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Actually, the one that I thought was really interesting was the one that the Buffalo Bills proposed. I've always felt that if we're trying to get opportunities for minority coaches, the one thing we've got to do, we've got to open up that window and have it equitable for everybody there. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the response is by the league to that. I thought that was a good proposal. I've never been a real big fan of that, just a limited time, because you're in the playoffs, you're trying to get your team ready and to sneak off and do some things and just try and sneak it into a window. Let's just try to level that playing field as much as we can. The onside kick rule, anything we can do to make that play a little bit safer. I was one of the guys out on the wing, back in the day, in the position to block to allow the guy behind me to catch, or had to make the decision to catch it myself or field it myself. Some of the bigger collisions I've had have come on onside kicks. So if we can help that out a little bit, that'd be great. And then overtime, I think we're gonna continue to keep trying to figure this one out. I like it right now. I like the fact that if we go down and score a touchdown, game's over. If you go down, kick a field goal, the other team gets a possession, an opportunity to tie. That was one of the things that bothered me in overtime, was the ability to win the game on a field goal. So I kind of like where it is right now. From a time standpoint, I think we just kind of let it stay where it is. That's my opinion. I think overtime is always going to be challenging. I do not like what they do in college. I do not like that at all. The spring leagues, I was with the Alliance and I was with the XFL, and we did some unique things from an overtime perspective. And we had some things built in during the course of the game, to try and prevent, the situation from getting down to being in a tie game. So maybe something else to look at is not just getting to the point at the end of the game when it's a tie, we got to go to overtime. Or there's some things we can put in that 60-minute time frame there to incentivize, teams to try something else to get off those numbers that are going to force us into overtime.
And so I want to ask you about your thoughts on the Cowboys season. Obviously, had a major injury to Dak Prescott early on. The season really didn't go as planned in Mike McCarthy's first year. What were your thoughts overall just on the season as we approach free agency?
It had to be disappointing for everybody, especially once the injury happened. Dak was able to keep pace with the opposition. The defense was really struggling to kind of find their way. I'm a Mike Nolan fan. I like Mike Nolan. That was going to be a really tough transition, going from a Rod Marinelli style defense to a Mike Nolan style defense, and then you don't have any offseason to help you do that. You're going to have to dramatically change your personnel. The style of player in that defensive front that works for Rod Marinelli is not going to work so well for the Mike Nolan style. So you're transitioning scheme and personnel in a season, in an off season, where there was just not enough time to do it. So I think we saw some warning signs early on, and they just couldn't get the ship righted during the course of the season. But in the beginning, when Dak was there, they were shootouts, but there was an opportunity for them with the ball in hand, to win the game at the end, and they were just unable to do that. So it's interesting to see what would happen, if they're able to knock off the Rams, if they're able to knock off the Falcons, get on some type of roll early in the season. But obviously that wasn't the case. So once the injury happened, things just kind of snowballed, and unfortunately that's what's a 6-10 season is going to have. Something like that occur. You're going to have something that really kind of changes, the course of your season early on, and the inability to navigate through that.
Are there any guys, I know there's some rumored cap casualties coming up with the reduced salary cap. Are there any guys you would not be surprised to see that are on the hot seat?
Don't really know the cap numbers well, but I don't think this is a Dallas Cowboys situation. I think this is about 27 teams around the league. There's about 4 or 5 that have done a good job managing the cap and are coming into a 2021 season where there's going to be a reduction in the salary cap for the first time. So, I don't think Dallas is the only team in that position. I think you're already starting to see some of the decisions made, saving a couple million here, a couple million there. The big problem with Dallas is, sitting on that Dak Prescott contract and having to do the franchise tag for a second year in a row if they can't get that long-term deal done. And that puts that number up about 38 million, I think. So at a time when, the cap is being reduced, you're going to have to step up and pay a big contract to your quarterback. So I think that that's going to be the interesting thing as they go into this, is how are they going to navigate that? Because that'll impact every decision that's made beyond that. Where can we shave some things? Where can we extend some guys out, restructure contracts to free up a little bit of money? And then you're kicking the can down the road, and that's all going to come back and get you at some point. So I think we're going to have about 27 teams this year that are going to see that, it's proven to be a savvy way to do business, where you just, hey, we're going to extend.
Deal with it later.
Salary cap, it's always going up. It's always going to go up, 8, 10, 12% every year. Well, guess what? Not this year. So it's going to be interesting to see I think we're going to see a lot of change, during the course of the offseason as teams try to manage that roster.
What % chance would you give it that you ever see Russell Wilson in a Cowboys uniform? Because his rumors are everywhere.
Yeah, I say zero. I say zero. For me, if Russell has his list of 4 that he would be open to going, to me, it's Chicago. If this is what you want to do, and everything that I'm reading is he wants to get into a style that allows him, statistically to be on par with some of the other, top flight quarterbacks in the NFL. That's not going to work out in Seattle with a Pete Carroll style. They run the football, they play good defense, they limit their turnovers. It's old school, but it's proven it works. We're seeing Kevin Stefanski implement the same thing in Cleveland. And look what Baker Mayfield's doing there. You can have those numbers. You're not going to have the 5,000 yard season, but you're going to have 3,500, 3,800, 4,200 yards passing. But we're not here for stats. We're here for winning football games and winning championships. So if Russell really is in this for what he's in it for now, from what I'm reading, to me, Chicago is where he should go, because you're talking about Matt Nagy, who comes off the Andy Reid tree. That's the hot offense in the NFL right now. So if that's what you want to do, it all comes down to scheme. It comes down to style of coaching. It comes down to the aggressive nature of the coach. We've seen that from Nagy. It's very similar from all the guys that we see that come out from under Andy Reid. It's very aggressive. They throw the football a lot. They're usually about 65-35 when you talk about pass run option. So, to me, looking at the teams that he's talked about, that would be the one that makes the most sense. Even in Dallas, even with Dak Prescott here and what they were able to do, last year, throwing the football, this is still a team that wants to control the game with Ezekiel Elliott. So it'll be different than it was in Seattle, but I don't think it's the big change that Russell's looking for if he's going to leave Seattle. If he's going to leave Seattle, it has to be the perfect fit. And I think that Chicago fits what he's looking for more than Dallas.
You think Watson gets moved, or is he staying put?
That's going to be a tough one. I mean, he has continuously voiced his desire to leave, even with some of the changes that have happened now with staff and front office. It still seems like, he would prefer to leave. To me, that's the intriguing one, because it's more of a quarterback-friendly contract that he's carrying right now. Early in his career still. I think there's a tremendous upside there. I was shocked, late in the season, somebody put up Deshaun Watson's numbers, and I double tanked on him. I'm like, are you serious? I mean, why are we not talking about this guy more? I mean, those are phenomenal numbers. So obviously playing at a very, very high level in an organization where he was not real happy with. So, we'll have to wait and see. But to me, with all the talk about movement with the quarterback position, I think that Deshaun Watson would be the one that I'd be focused on right now.
And then are there any guys that are free agents that you think might thrive in a different situation that you look forward to seeing what they do?
I think J.J. Watt opposite, I'm going to go blank on his name now.
Chandler Jones?
Yes, Chandler Jones. That's when really unique things happen. And I think we saw a little bit of that in the Super Bowl with Kansas City, right? Both tackles are down. You're going to struggle on both edges. Now that can be due to injury, or it can be due to talent on the defensive side. All of a sudden you roll out 2 really good edge rushers. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure on your protection schemes. So I think that J.J. Watt going out to Arizona is something to watch. He's back with DeAndre Hopkins. That Arizona seems to be trending in the right direction, but they just don't have the consistency through the year. I think all of us thought that they were going to be a playoff team. About week 10, week 12, and then just didn't have the ability to finish the right way. So, J.J. Watt may be the type of guy that gets them over the top. Matthew Stafford with the Rams, I think could be very interesting. Matthew Stafford has been in Detroit his whole career, and most of the time he's been under a defensive-minded head coach. Rod Marinelli, Jim Schwartz, recently with going blank with the Matt Patricia.
Yeah.
I think Jim Caldwell was the one time he had a little bit of a window with an offensive-minded head coach, and that's just it kind of changes everything. I mean, we saw it with Jared Goff when he was with the Rams with Jeff Fisher. That's how you structure your team. It's defensive led, it's special teams. Offense usually becomes kind of that third wheel in the three phases. You want to be, if you're a defensive coach, you're looking to play good defense, run the football, play good special teams, and minimize your mistakes, which means you're not passing the football a whole lot. Matthew Stafford is now going to be with Sean McVay. And we saw the jump with Jared Goff moving from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay. Does Matthew Stafford, who in my opinion still has the ability to play at a very, very high level, get into that system with the weapons on the outside and a run game that's going to be vastly improved next year? I think Matthew Stafford is going to be really, really interesting. And I really think the NFC West, just the entire NFC West, is going to be fun to watch now. You saw everybody's reactions when J.J. Watt came in. You look at the potential for some of those defensive lines on all four teams, the play of the quarterback on all four teams. I think the NFC West is going to be in 2021 what we thought it was going to be in 2020.
Interesting. Are there any guys you're keeping your eye on ahead of the draft that maybe you think Dallas might look at, or just guys that you're ready to see at the next level?
Zach Wilson is the one guy that I'm most intrigued by. He seems to be the guy that's racing up the charts more than anybody right now. I had a friend that I work with that was on the Zach Wilson train a long time ago. And at that point, he was trending probably late teens, early 20s. I mean, he's all the way up to number 2 now. I think that's somebody that's intriguing. I want to see how Trevor Lawrence plays in the NFL. There's been a ton of hype around him. I saw some of his workout. It was impressive. But I just want to see how he transfers from the collegiate game up to the professional game. Other than that, right now for me, I haven't had the opportunity to dig into it a whole lot. I think what we'll see now, I think, last season with what happened with Kansas City, I think there's going to be an emphasis on making sure your offensive line is secure and you have depth. I think you can look at Dallas to see what happened in Dallas, to see a very similar situation. When a season kind of goes sideways on you, a lot of times it's that offensive line that gets hit hard. I think last year, you saw what Tampa Bay was able to do, kind of moving up and grabbing Wolf there at 14. And they're talking about him playing at a Pro Bowl level, during the course of the season. So, adding an offensive lineman can really change your offense. And, I think we saw that with Dallas back in the day, about 5 years ago when you had Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, playing at a very, very high level with Travis Frederick at center. They had invested high picks into that offensive line. And that's where everything comes from that, right? And we're starting to see that. The passing game in the NFL, the ball's coming out quick. We're more perimeter based. So for a while there, it was all skill players and quarterbacks. Well, you still got to be able to run the ball effectively, and you got to be able to hold it and stretch it. So that's where the offensive line comes in. So I think we've seen some teams offensively that have some great potential when you look at their skill players, but maybe not enough in the offensive line. And I think that's one of the frustrations that what Russell Wilson has shared out in Seattle. There just hasn't been that commitment to the offensive line, and he's got roughed up, the last couple seasons.
Okay, one last current league question for you. Who's the team to beat in the NFC East next year? Because Danny White told me it's Dallas.
In my opinion, it's Washington. A surprise team this year. They were starting from a much further position back than Tampa, but we were able to watch Tampa progress all season as Tom Brady became more comfortable week after week, not only in that system, but understanding, the skills sets of his players, his teammates on the offensive side. You could see the light bulb went on about week 12, and then they went on that great run. Washington, we had them a couple of times early on, and one of the things that we knew right away, I called Washington as the winner of the NFC East in about week 5, because we had done the Giants, we had done Washington, we had done Dallas, we hadn't done Philly yet. Philly was kind of that outlier. They were the only team in the NFC East that didn't have any change. You expected them to run away with the division. There was new head coaches, new staffs, the challenges of the pandemic in the offseason. Philadelphia should have controlled the NFC East last year. But early on, you could tell that Ron Rivera's message had gotten through to his players. They had bought in. And just that defensive front. It's kind of built the same way that San Francisco built their team when they went on that run to go to the Super Bowl. Right now, the offensive lines in the NFC East, I think all of them are going to struggle to protect against that Washington front. I think that Ron Rivera and Scott Turner will do a great job taking a step offensively. I thought they had some great additions last year. To me, they're the team to beat, coming into 2021, which I don't think a lot of people would have thought going into 2020. I think you looked at that and Ron Rivera coming up, and just you're trying to focus on football and getting your team ready to play, and you got to deal with all these other things that are swirling around the organization. So what that entire team, front office, staff was able to do last year under all those challenges was really, really impressive. This year, if it's a little bit more, I don't want to say relaxed, but it's, hey, we're not putting out fires everywhere. We can just really kind of focus on our team and go from there. Ron Rivera is going to be healthy. I mean, he's battling cancer, during the course of the season. I mean, it was unbelievable how many different things that they had to overcome, and yet they still win the NFC East. So, and truth be told, the only time that Tampa was stressed in the playoffs was against Washington. That was the best opportunity for Tampa to lose a game, was when they played Washington.
What do you think they do at quarterback? They just released Alex Smith today. You got Heineke on a minor deal, but he's only played, a game and a half of them, but like 3 total in his career. And you got Kyle Allen coming off injury. Do you think they grab a guy in the draft? Do you think they go for somebody free agency or trade? What do you see them doing?
I think it's going to be interesting. You would think that they would have to go grab somebody in the draft.
They had 19.
Yeah, and they're going to have to move up. So having been involved in both the Alliance and the XFL the last 2 springs, I'm very familiar with Taylor Heineke. I had a conversation with Norv Turner about Taylor Heineke because he was down in Carolina and just wanted to get his perspective on it. And he said, listen, he's fantastic. He's the perfect guy you're looking for in that league. And I think what people have to understand is, a quarterback that plays in college where Taylor Heineke played at Old Dominion, yep, you don't have great offensive lines, right? I mean, you're going to get very comfortable in being around a pocket that's falling apart on a continual basis. Some of these quarterbacks that are coming from the Power Fives and sit in a clean pocket for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and don't understand what that feels like, because you're not going to get a clean pocket in the NFL. I think some of these guys that are coming from some of these smaller schools that can throw the ball, they've got everything else that's there. You may look at the level of competition that they played against and try to struggle to find out how they're going to fit. One of the things I think that's being overlooked right now is how comfortable they can be in a pocket that is breaking down. And I think the best thing that Taylor Heineke showed in that opportunity in the playoffs against Tampa Bay was how good he is when that play breaks down. I thought he was outstanding. So I can see why they made some of the decisions they made at the quarterback spot. But I agree with you. I think you have to be forward thinking into the future. You look at it, if on draft day, we've got a kind of top of the draft board is quarterback heavy, maybe something happens, on draft day, and all of a sudden that starts to shift down a little bit. Some of the guys that we expected to see gone, by 10, 12, all of a sudden start to drift. There's been a run on some other position. Does Washington decide to maybe put some draft capital together and make a trade to kind of move up and grab one of them? But knowing Scott Turner going into the season, if he was dealt a hand that he had to go with Taylor Heineke and Kyle Allen, I think he could make that work. I really think he could make that work.
Yeah, because when they had Haskins, he looked like a deer in the headlights. Allen was fine. Alex Smith couldn't move, and then you put Heineke out there, and I think he outperformed anybody's expectations in that wild card game. So we'll see. It's very interesting to see what they do. I want to ask you a little bit about your career. I saw that you didn't think you were going to end up at Syracuse, and you were looking at D3 schools.
Yeah. I'm from a very, very small town, up in Western New York. So, if you're Boston College or West Virginia or Syracuse and you're coming across New York State, you're coming across I-90, and then you're going to dip into Eastern Pennsylvania and into Ohio on your scouting, you got to kind of break off and go about an hour up north into the far northwest corner of New York State, to find me. So, we weren't a football hotbed. We've had a number of good players come out of Western New York and have had long, productive careers in the NFL. But there's just not a ton of us. It's not a hotbed. So, recruiting's hard. Back then it's much different than it is today. So, a lot of it was done by you, your family, your high school coach, trying to work networks. And we had some good connections. We had Pete Rayo, who was a physical education teacher at our high school, who had some connections with the Bills. So, he had some contacts into college people. But, for us, it's just hard. It's hard to come out of that area. So I was kind of focused on, Division III, I was a good student in high school. Probably my first pick at that time would have been Cornell in the Ivies. Maxie Bond had just kind of come in as a head coach there. For me, it would have been easy to get in on the academic side. I wanted to continue to play football. I enjoyed the game. So I was going to play it someplace. And then, the Syracuse opportunity opened up very, very late in the process. We're talking December. So, at the time I was down visiting Cornell, I also went over to the other side of the hill and visited Ithaca. And at the time, Ithaca was a dominant Division III, football team. And Jim Butterfield, the coach there, we sat down to talk and just asking, who I was looking at. And, you kind of went through all the typical D3s, especially back where I grew up, Buffalo, Buff State, Canisius, and then, Union was great. St. Lawrence was really good. And then obviously Ithaca. And I said, well, Syracuse has recently jumped in. And, kind of looked up and he goes, Syracuse. He goes, I don't think you can play at Syracuse. So that kind of made my decision, right there that I was gonna go to Syracuse and prove Jim Butterfield wrong that I could play at that level. So very fortunate. I heard stories, later on from our equipment manager. I was the last scholarship given that year. One of the players who had verbally committed to Syracuse changed his mind as signing day approached and went, I think he went to Penn State. So a scholarship opened up last second. And the consensus was, let's give it to the kid from Western New York and keep the Western New York alumni quiet, and we'll get a good practice player for the next 5 years.
A question, since it feels like every single person in broadcasting went to Syracuse. Did you know any of these guys that are like up high in broadcasting now when you were playing on the football team? Maybe
I didn't. Yeah. What I did know was this Newhouse School of Communications. I did know that there was a pipeline from Syracuse to Bristol. I did know that behind the camera and on the technical side, there was a ton of Syracuse grads, down in New York, up in Bristol working for ESPN. I did know about Dick Stockton. I did know about Bob Costas. I did know about Mike Tirico was actually on campus when we were there. And for me today, I think Mike Tirico is one of the best in the business. Oh, yeah. Just seamless from football to Olympics to golf. Whatever it is, Mike can do it. So you were familiar with it, but I didn't go to Syracuse with the intention of playing football. And if that didn't work out, hey, I'll just, I'll be in the Newhouse School of Communications. I'll just slide into broadcasting. For me, it worked the other way, being on the analyst side and having the knowledge of the game of football and then being able to work with somebody. So yeah, I can't take credit for being that forward thinking and knowing that Syracuse had a great communication school that would open some doors up.
I think they had Dave Pash. I know Andrew Siciliano went there. It feels like everybody's at Syracuse. It's unbelievable. Did you kind of feel like you had like a chip on your shoulder? All right, if you found out that you're the last scholarship, obviously thought you'd be playing D3. You're playing D1. Did that kind of feel you a little bit? No,
it didn't. I didn't find that out until after. All came, that information was shared with me, years after I graduated. And for me at the time, it was just, hey, I want to graduate with no college debt. I wanted to walk away free and clear. And I'm not going to lie, the first year was challenging. I felt overwhelmed. The athlete that I was encountering on the field was somebody I'd never seen before. As a freshman, going against some of these, juniors and seniors, Syracuse had some good players at the time. They weren't putting up a great record. But boy, they had some good players. Our freshman year, we ended up knocking off Nebraska, who was number 1 in the country, and then went down to Gainesville and almost knocked off Florida the following week. So we almost beat back-to-back number 1s. That's how good our defense was, and that's who I was practicing against as a freshman. So it was a big upgrade. So a little overwhelmed my first year, but had great teammates. The coaching staff was phenomenal. We're talking. Dick McPherson was our head coach, more like the father figure, kind of old school, learned under, Sam Retigliano, Duffy Doherty, I think was a big influence on him as well. The old Michigan State coach, and we had George DeLeon, Paul Pasqualoni, Randy Edsel, Jim Hoffer, Clarence Brooks, Ivan Fears. These guys went on and coached in the NFL. They went on and were head coaches at the collegiate level.
I think Edsel was he at Towson? I went to Towson. Was he on Towson?
Randy Edsel? He was up at UConn for a while. He may have been down in Towson. it was just, it was a great staff. It was a great mix of old school and then young guys who were kind of up with what the current things were going on in the game of football. So we had a great staff, we had great teammates, and we had a great strength coach, Mike Woysick. So for me, it was getting in there, getting bigger, getting stronger, getting faster, knowing after that first year that I had a lot of work to do, but then having the ability to have the assets around me to accomplish that. So really it became, you're going to be able to do whatever you want to do. You just have to make that choice. And, you get yourself prepared for the opportunity. And I got an opportunity in spring football going into our sophomore year. So it was my redshirt freshman year in the spring. And the fullback position was wide open to competition. And that was the opportunity. And just took advantage of that. So was able to be named the starter coming out of spring football, and then started 3 years at Syracuse when expectations for me coming in were not that at all by the staff. So, but I'll credit Mike Woysick. Mike Woysick is my strength coach. Jim Hoffer, my running back coach, who really kind of came in and kind of relit the love of football for me. And then just having great teammates and a great coaching staff around you.
Who told you you could play in the NFL?
We started to see some guys from our team get drafted. So you're like, well, maybe I'll have an opportunity. Maybe come draft day, after my senior year, I'll be at a level where, somebody thinks that they'll have the opportunity to play. And then it was really, and I'll always remember this, Mel Kiper puts out that pre-draft book, and I was on the back cover. He had me on the back cover of his pre-draft manual. So, that all of a sudden, meant a lot to me that, hey, people who do this, have put you in a position where there's going to be an opportunity for you. Don Shula for the Dolphins came out and literally said, we're going to take the fullback from Syracuse in the second round with our pick. Now, there was a big movement on draft day. Lewis Oliver had dropped, that day down to about 25. So Miami took their second and third round picks and made a trade and moved back into the first round and took Lewis Oliver. But I had a good feeling where I was going to be slotted. And that there was going to be an opportunity for me to play at the NFL level.
What was your draft night experience like?
It was great. Family, close friends, my apartment in Syracuse, just kind of hanging out. It was a little bit nerve-wracking because he had the Miami incident happen. I had a good workout for Washington. I thought Washington was a possibility. They made a big trade to get Gerald Briggs from the Falcons, so they traded away their second and third round pick. So now I'm kind of like, well, I have no idea. Everybody's looking at me. I'm like, well, Miami and Washington were the two I felt good about. Maybe Philadelphia, and then Dallas. I think a lot of people forget about this. They took Steve Wisniewski early in the second round with their second round pick, and then traded that to the Raiders for the Raiders' second round pick, and then took me at 39. So Jimmy, was looking to get me there, but I think I think the pick was 30 or 32, felt that was a little bit too high and could get some draft capital, getting somebody for the Raiders. And there was already a relationship established between Al Davis and Jerry Jones. So, and Jimmy Johnston. So, an opportunity there to put together a little deal on draft day. So when the call came from the Cowboys, it kind of came out of the blue for me, but Tony Wise, the offensive line coach that was with the Cowboys, was with us at Syracuse early in my career. And Dave Campo, the secondary coach for the Cowboys, was up in Syracuse with us early in my career. So there was some familiarity with some of the coaches that were going to be on the Cowboys staff that were on the Syracuse staff during my time.
Eagles fans still flip you off?
Philly fans?
Yeah.
You know what? Some of the best compliments I've gotten are from Philly fans where they say, I hate Dallas, but I respect you as a player. And to me, that means a lot. The rivalry back there in the East was tremendous. I tell people all the time, they're like, oh my God, what was it like to play at the Vet? I said it was hard to play at the Vet, but there was nothing better than winning at the Vet. So there is a big rivalry between the 90s Cowboys and the 90s Eagles, probably similar to what the 70s Cowboys and the 70s Washington football team have. But for us, Philadelphia was the team that they were the last team in the East that we beat. The defenses were phenomenal in the early 90s. It was just, you were playing for something. We played in the playoffs multiple times. There was meaning for every game when we played Philadelphia. That's where a rivalry is developed. At the time, Washington was kind of trending down. Early on with our time in Dallas, Washington, they had the 1 year, and it's still one of my favorite games we ever played. We beat Washington at RFK when they were 11-0, and we were 6-5. And that's always been one of my favorite games. I think we walked down the field as an offense in the fourth quarter with a little over 7 minutes to go, and we never left the field. We ran the clock all the way down. So there were some times where it was Washington. There were some times where it was New York, but it was predominantly the Eagles that had the big games. And a lot of people forget Arizona was in our division at that time, and that was one of the most physical games we played twice a year. It was against the Arizona Cardinals.
Because I know I was talking to Chad Hennings. I asked him if he had any interesting experiences at the vet. And he said the first time he played there, I guess it recently snowed. And he said they told Jimmy Johnston to wear a helmet because apparently Eagles fans were throwing ice at him.
Worse than that. The trainers came down the sideline and said, everybody put your helmets on. They're putting batteries in the snowballs. And at that time, a snowball hit right in front of us, and a C-cell battery rolled out of the snowball. Not double A's, not triple A's. A C. So as we're leaving the field, there's two security guys that have Jimmy, locked in arm, and they're running with him, covering him. And I'm about 30 yards behind, and I see the officer just go down. And he had taken a snowball from up high, got him right in the side of the head. And there was a C-cell in that one, I think, as well. And he was in our training room after the game. He had a Fred Flintstone bump on the side of his head. And our trainer said he was very lucky that it didn't hit him in the temples. So you had that. You had, the other thing is the eagle at the center of the field was not turf. It was just paint. It was basically matted down steel wool. It was like something you shave cheese with. And the rule was, if you're going to cross the eagle, you have to get all the way across. Don't get tackled on the eagle. And I remember Kelvin Martin. You could see him kind of hesitate for a second, and then he took off and he got tackled on the eagle. He came back to the huddle and he goes, how does it look? And he showed me his arm. I'm like, oh my God. I said, you could probably go find that on the eagle and stick it back on. I mean, it was like somebody took a divot out of his elbow.
When the police officers were leading the way, they didn't say, Moose, we need you to lead the way. Charge, block
get in front of us. You got your helmet on.
So I asked some Eagles fans, and they sent me something I thought was very interesting. Did you and Jay Novacek ever swap jerseys in practice to mess with coaches?
No, never did.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think our body styles were too different.
Yeah.
And our athletic ability was different. They would know it was me running a route with an 84 on.
Yeah.
And they knew it wouldn't be me blocking with a 48 on if it was Jay.
What was it like being on Wishbone?
New poster smell. Okay, let's see the moose.
Hey, you guys, come meet Daryl.
Daryl, this is Joe Talbot and Samantha Kepler. Kids, meet the moose.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Wishbone.
Hi, Wishbone.
That's funny, you don't look like a moose.
It was a show that I wasn't all that aware of at the time, but it was filmed right here in Dallas. It was huge with the kids.
When I was young, it was on all the time.
Yeah, Barney was filmed down here, and Wishbone were filmed down here. So two of the bigger kids shows at the time were filmed right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it was kind of fun, with the Super Bowl ring tie-in and everything. But one of the big things they promoted was reading, and at that time I'd been doing a reading campaign with a company down here called Half Price Books. We'd been doing it for about 8 years. So it was a good tie-in there, to get that message out and get that one across as well.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, so I saw you've worked with a lot of different organizations: Special Olympics, Children's Cancer Fund, Cystic Fibrosis, and literally Institute for Texas. How do you find the time to give back because you're so busy?
I think we all watched how Troy did it, and tried to model after what he was doing. He generated a foundation that he did the Aikman end zones, and I think he's gone on and done that with Garth Brooks as a partner, and he had an extended hospital stay when he was young. I had an extended hospital stay when I was young. So that kind of hit home to me that he remembered something that was challenging at the time and wanted to make sure it was a little bit more enjoyable for kids that got stuck in that situation. So you could see him kind of drive all his efforts into that. And it kind of showed us, find something you're passionate about, find a way to ingrain yourself in the community away from the game of football. So for us, everybody, Troy was a great leader, not on the field, but off the field as well. So I think if you looked around at all the guys on our team during that time, they kind of found something. Now, a lot of those that you talk about were affiliated with the Dallas Cowboys. There was traditional fashion shows, but we all tried to find that one thing. And for me, it was reading. Like I mentioned before, I was a good student in high school. I know the importance of an education, and I know how much reading contributes to your success as a student. And you just saw some of the, the illiteracy rates down here. And what was surprising to me is I think sometimes we think of it as maybe, kids in inner city schools or environments where, they're not at grade level. No, this was older Texans. Yeah. When I started, the median age of the illiterate Texan was 32. Wow. So there were a lot of rural farmers and ranchers that, didn't have the opportunity to get a quality education because they grew up in an industry that was handed down from family to family, generation to generation. And you worked in the field, you worked in the oil platform. You knew that very, very well, but you might not be able to, balance a checkbook or do things around the house. So some of the stories that I started to hear when I visited with the people for literacy instruction for Texas were along those lines. And it really hit home to me. And then some of the successes, you go to the graduation ceremonies and to see the growth of, and they would tell you, like when he came in, he wouldn't read, he wouldn't raise his hand, he wouldn't speak. And now we can't get him to shut up. He's got so much confidence. He's a completely different person now that he can read, well enough to get along through life. So for me, it kind of grabbed me right away. And that's what we all learned from Troy. Find out the one that you're passionate about so you can commit your time and your energy to it and have everything work out in a positive way.
Next time you call a Dallas Washington game, you should link up with Dexter Manley. I had him on. He actually recently started a foundation in the DC area to help raise literacy rates because they're so low in the inner city. So
yeah. And he was somebody that, you hear the story about Dexter that came through all the way through Oklahoma State University without the ability to read at a really, high school level. So it's absolutely. It's something near and dear to his heart as well. And I think there's a lot of people out there, and I think our concern is now that we're such a screen generation that, that ability to read, to sit down with a book and escape for a while is being lost on this generation.
Yeah. So you obviously blocked for Emmitt Smith. He became the all-time leading rusher. You spent a lot of time with Emmitt Smith. What's your favorite story from your career playing, or on or off the field with Emmitt Smith?
Oh, there's a ton of them. Obviously, everybody will automatically go to the Hall of Fame induction, and that was amazing. What he said, how he singled me out. I had the opportunity to do the game where he actually broke Walter Payton's record against the Seattle Seahawks, and we actually, were able to. I was down on the field. My producer at the time, gave me a wireless mic. I came out of the booth, went down to the field, did the broadcast from down to field level. So when he broke the record, we were able to share and embrace and hug. And that was my favorite one. But we have one that not a lot of people know about. He came out and he said, he goes, I don't know what Daryl was doing, but he went to cut the guy. And there's a great kind of sequence where you'll see it. I can't remember the linebacker from the Raiders, but he goes over the top of me and kind of comes down and hits Emmitt, and Emmitt kind of staggers and regains his balance and goes into the end zone. And I had just gotten one of the worst burners I've ever had, and my shoulder was still jacked up. And then we're down inside the goal line, and I told him, I said, my shoulder is dinged. I said, on this lead, I'm cutting. Which you're not supposed to do, especially down on the goal line. You want to stay up and get a little bit of movement, give your running back an opportunity to find a running lane. So I went to cut and I got a little bit too low, and he went right over the top of me. I mean, his helmet came right down in Emmitt's helmet, and he has never let me forget about that one. And it's like, how many have I done the right way? And this is what you're going to hold up. You're going to remember this one. So we always get a little bit of chuckle about that one. Every time I see that highlight, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. My phone's going to ring, or I'm going to get a text.
What was your favorite Super Bowl?
First one, 27. It was magical from the winning candlestick against the 49ers, the 2-week period, getting ready for the game. The following year for 28 was only 1 week. It was a little bit hectic, but 27, we're staying at the Lowe's Santa Monica. We're practicing at UCLA. The way the game went, everybody on our team got to play in the Super Bowl. You know, if you've got a Super Bowl that's a tight fit, you're going to have a lot of guys who are part of that team on the sidelines for that team, but feel like, you know, yeah, I was there, but I never really got to get on the field. It was awesome that everybody on our team was able to take the field that day. So yeah, 27 was just magical. You know, the whole season, the whole run through the playoffs, it's just one of those moments in time. And really, people will say, you know, which one's the best, but that one's just a time frame, that 2-week gap from the NFC Championship game all the way through to the victory against Buffalo.
I just got one last question for you. Who's the toughest guy for you to block in your entire career?
Eric Hill on the inside for the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe the original Ray Lewis, you know, a 6'3", 255, 260 pound inside linebacker that could run, was on the field on third down. Always knew where 58 was, especially if you were running a shallow crossing route, because Eric's thought process was, if you're inside 5 yards, why should I try and run with it? We're going to just knock you off your feet. So you always had to know where he was that way. It was hard, you know. There was Seth Joyner was a handful at the end of the line of scrimmage. You know, Carl Banks was like he was anchored into the floor of Giant Stadium. He hit him, he wouldn't even move him. You know, I had an opportunity to play against Lawrence Taylor a few times, you know, early in my career. You know, played against some of the best guys, you know, at the outside linebacker and inside linebacker position. But our game plan against the Arizona Cardinals was very basic, was very physical. And Eric was one of the more physical linebackers in the NFL. Never made a Pro Bowl. I voted for him every year. I just thought he was a very underrated player, and just one of those guys that played for a team out in Arizona that a lot of people didn't get the opportunity to see play. But I always thought he was a handful.
Are there any guys in the league today that you're like thankful you never have to match up with?
I tell you, the athleticism, it seems from generation to generation, it just continues to grow. I tell everybody, if you looked at a roster back when I played, you would just move everybody back. You know, the outside, the defensive ends are now outside linebackers. The outside linebackers are now safeties. You know, these guys are just bigger, faster, more explosive. There's a number of them. We had some of these guys starting to emerge, you know, at the end of my career. But now they're just on everybody's roster. These 6'5", 335 pound defensive tackles that can run you down in a 10-yard space. You know, I think that's a unique athlete that's on the football field, you know, consistently. That was kind of an outlier when we were there. You know, we had Dwight Freeney coming off the edge with God, what did he run the 40 and 4.3 something, 4.4 something. You know, to be that big, that athletic. We're starting to see, you know, guys pop out like that. And then there's this new safety, this hybrid safety, this, you know, 225 pound guy, 6'3", 6'2", you know, 225 pound guy. He can come up and stuff the run. You know, he can run with wide receivers down the field. You know, people always ask me who's the biggest hit you ever took. You know, there's three of them. You know, Marcus Paul, who was a teammate of mine at Syracuse, got me in spring ball. We unfortunately just lost Marcus recently this past fall. Chuck Cecil from Green Bay, and then Ronnie Lott. So those are three guys, and those are all secondary players. You know, Marcus was a safety, Ronnie was a safety, and Chuck was a safety. You know, those are the type of guys that you're starting to see that physical presence pop up again in the NFL, where, you know, everybody kind of knows. You knew where 42 was. If you played against the Niners or the Raiders and Ronnie was in the secondary, you before you got into your 3-point stance, you know, you found out where number 42 was and what potential impact he could have on that play. And yeah, Ronnie got me good one day. You know, it is. Dennis Smith got me, you know, with the Broncos one time, and taught me a good lesson. You know, if you're going to motion out wide, you can't look back over your shoulder, because if I looked inside, I was always worried I was going to drift towards the line of scrimmage and get called for illegal procedure. So I would look over my other shoulder, and then I'd see it, and I'd turn and go. And as soon as I turned around, he had just dropped down from the safety and just decleated me. I mean, he helped me right up, and he goes, "I watched you on film do that all week. You can't do that." So I chalked that up to a lesson learned from Dennis Smith.
Actually, I have one last question. So I'm assuming most of the games, if not, probably not, but most of the games you worked this year, broadcast this year, probably nobody in the stadium. What was that like?
It was odd. It was challenging for us, you know, because you use the crowd for the emotion from them to help you with your broadcast. So we had some white noise pumped into our headsets. You know, Kevin Burkhardt and I, after a while, decided not to do that. We felt that our our volume, our excitement, our love of the game was coming through without having to have the white noise pumped through, because it kind of gave you a little bit of a headache by the end of the day. So we did games in Washington, in New York, in areas where the stands were empty. We did a game at Lambeau when it was empty. We also had the playoff game where they let in about 8,500 people. The difference was dramatic. We did a Dallas game with about 18,000. We did a Kansas City game with about 21,000. It was amazing, the difference. And I'll go back to just, the 3,000 we had in New Orleans, from when it was empty to when it was at 3,000. In Lambeau, from when it was empty to when it was at 8,500. Just having that emotion in the stadium was huge. So yeah, I'm hoping here in 2021 we've got a handle on this, and if they're still reluctant to go full, we're at least getting towards 50% capacity, 75% capacity.
And speaking of that Lambeau game, I wanted to ask you, the suit, were people messing with you on set there with the long suit? Because Twitter was having a field day.
Yeah. Nobody there. It was an overcoat. I mean, it was cold. You leave the window open at Lambeau. It wasn't as cold as it can be, but it was probably, by halftime it was down in the upper 20s. So I was not taking off the overcoat, because then I'm gonna get cold. So yeah, it was, the best one was Barstool. Barstool hit me with it first, and I think that got everything started. But that was one of my favorite ones. It looks like Daryl Johnston's getting ready to go to a speakeasy right after the game. So I hit them back and said, yeah, I'm just looking for the password right now to get in. So, but I have fun with it. I'm never going to be a guy that wears a blue suit, a white shirt, and a blue tie. I'm not going to be a G-man when I'm on television. So I have fun with my wardrobe, and some people embrace it and some people think I'm crazy.
Hey, everybody's a critic, but I want to thank you again for taking time to chat for a few minutes. This has been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely, Zach.